Hello and welcome to this episode of the Sticky Note Marketing Show. I am your host, Mary Czarnecki, and today I am thrilled to invite you to meet Veronica Romney. Veronica is our guest expert today. If you do not know V, she is an international keynote speaker and author of Identity Marketing, which we're going to be digging into today, as well as a workshop facilitator. So thank you, Veronica, so much for joining us here on the Sticky Note Marketing Show.
And thanks to you, friend, I'm also now a faculty member of the same thing that we get to do together, which is like all this really fun stuff. So we're both faculty members of ANA now, which puts us in the room with some really cool brands facilitating workshops with their teams, which you and I both love and are very team centric. So that's a lot of fun.
Yes, no, definitely. And I want to be digging into some of those things that
Yes.
are with your big brands, because one of the things I think also that we share is this passion for helping the little guy, right? The
Uh-huh.
small business owner, the entrepreneur, the founders, but also recognizing the fact that no matter how big your brand is, there's always still something to learn. So we're going to be digging
Totally.
into that today.
Yeah. Well, and I think you are a small business owner. It's in the family. You guys have the restaurant. Like I grew up with Cuban immigrant parents who owned an air conditioning company for 33 years to provide for me and my siblings. So like I will always identify proudly as a small business owner and entrepreneur. But man, the work that we do is, I think it's so cool when you're leveraging the psychology of how we function as human beings, because then big or small brands can still leverage it to be powerful.
And I think that's the point, right? At the end of the day,
Mm-hmm.
whether you are a global brand or
Right.
the local restaurant, you're still attracting humans, unless we're
Correct.
talking about the aliens at the bottom of the ocean. I think it's a different episode. We're still trying to connect with human beings, and we have to
Mhm.
understand how human beings really work at a fundamental.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's what's so cool about marketing. I think to me, marketing the craft that you and I get to exercise for so many years now, it's both art and science. It's persuasive, it's psychology based, it's fundamentally why do people do what they do? Why do they buy what they buy? What does their purchases say about their self-concept, who they are? Because really it's an affirmation of who they see themselves to be. So all of that, whether you identify as a therapist or not, but it plays into it. That is marketing. We are the people that get to decide the gift wrapping around services, products, offers, businesses. We say, hey, we're going to dress this thing for marketplace approval and ultimately acquisition. And that's what makes our work and mantle so exciting because we can really be in the center of culture.
And I think that's one of the things that I'm really excited about, this shift that you're trumpeting,
Mhm.
that you're leading, which is
Thank you.
this shift from really thinking about buying something, right? I am
Oh,
buying this
yes.
item, I am saying yes to this service. And the invitation you're really making to brand leaders to say, look, you're not getting them just to buy something.
Yeah.
Like you said, you're inviting them to be something.
Yeah.
So talk to me more about how that,
Uh,
I know this is an idea that you've been growing for a
Noodling.
while and now birthed into the book, but how did that evolve? Let's
Yeah.
dig in a little bit about that evolution.
It's a culmination of things. This is anytime that you put your heart and soul into a body of work of that size, like a book is no joke. Oh my gosh. Other than like birthing a human, I've felt very much 42 weeks pregnant at the end. I'm like, get it out. Like it just need to be done. And not because I'm not excited about what's coming. It's just like such a laborish type of process. And if you're going to put a body of work out there, it usually is going to be a culmination, a summation of what you have both professionally and personally been undergoing yourself for a number of years. I think for me to put a book out called Identity Marketing, that's exactly what was happening under my feet in so many ways. It was very evident in some of the programs I was doing where I was helping marketers become rainmakers and CEOs be visionaries. That was a kind of an identity upgrade in the work, the professional development programs I was running. My identity was changing with my sister's breast cancer diagnosis. All of our identities as a family were changing because of something pretty significant and who we saw her to be, who she saw herself to be, what the ramifications of her identity. Now she's a breast cancer survivor. But also, like when I think about identity marketing, and I'm sure that we'll define it and get into the logistics of what it is, to me, I think I've always deeply loved relationship marketing above all other marketing mediums. There's social media, there's paid, there's search, there's tons. But if I reflect back at my parents' business, my own business, how I've made it thus far, thus far in my career, it's always because of the quality of relationships. And I felt like 2024 was a reckoning year for all businesses of all sizes. If you were in the marketing pursuit of transactions, that was no longer working. But the brands who had taken the time to build quality relationships with their buyers, they were reaping the benefits of those relationships in a very tough economic cycle. And so for me, identity marketing, which is like literally talking about persons, how they identify on the inside, who they seek to become, really you're just forming a relationship with the truth of someone. And that's way different than just pursuing a transaction.
For those of us listening, right? Some of our folks listening may have already received their book, bought the book, know what we're talking about when we say identity marketing. But for those people who
Yes.
let's go back a little bit. So
Sure.
help us understand, right? In this new invitation to think about
Yes.
shifting into really inviting and tapping into this deeper sense of who am I? What is identity marketing? When someone hears you say identity marketing, what is it they should think about?
Yeah. So identity marketing, as defined in the book, is connecting your brand so deeply with somebody's identity, who they are and who they wish to become, that they will literally desire to be buried in your brand, like literally be buried in your brand, which is why the book and my keynote presentation opens with a story of Billy Stanley being buried, sitting on top of his Harley Davidson, being lowered into the ground by a crane in a plexiglass coffin. Like he wasn't being buried as a Harley Davidson buyer 25679. Like he was clearly, it was way more than just the purchase. He was being buried as a Harley hog. And that identity was so deeply just entrenched in his own self-concept, his self-label, his outward expression of his belief about himself. And to the grave, that's exactly how he wanted to be remembered, not just where he got to ride into heaven, but he wanted the world to see him do that. That's how significant identity marketing is, was when you can tie your brand with somebody's self-concept. Now, because your audience and you are like, you're a walking dumbbell MBA, you're like one of the smartest humans I've ever met in my freaking life. And I would imagine that your listeners are too. So let's also make the point to say, I'm not talking about brand identity. I think oftentimes the word identity is most associated in our world with brand identity. And I want to make the differentiation that like brand identity is an external effort within a brand's control to differentiate itself in the marketplace by saying, this is my logo, these are my colors, this is my choice in typography and brand voice. Like these are things within my control that I have to say, this is me. Identity marketing is not starting with you, the brand. It's really the consumer's identity, how I see myself internally, and then an outward expression of that identity. That is not the same thing as an external pursuit. This is an internal conversation with your consumer and themselves.
And I appreciate you making that distinction because, yeah, sometimes as marketers, we hear the word identity and that external, like you said, yeah, what's in our control. Because,
correct,
right, this conversation, this connection with the deeper, who am I, or how do I self-identify as a consumer or a client of our businesses? It's within our control or within our influence, but not necessarily maybe control. So
correct.
I would invite the listeners or folks that are watching us here on the video version of this. I know some of the people that I've chatted with after they've been exposed to your classes. And by the way, definitely, if you get the chance to be in a room with Veronica when she's on stage, I highly recommend it.
My Latina flag comes out.
Yes, I love it.
Get spicy.
Spicy is totally right. But you're getting people fired up. You're getting people about this idea. And I know there could be some people listening who say, oh yeah, but Mary, like, we're not exciting enough to have people buried in our brand. No one's gonna, and I would challenge people to start thinking about, grab that sticky note. That's why we have the name of the show. But I'd invite them to play with, but what if they could? You have examples of brands that in your book and in the teachings that you've done where it doesn't have to be super sexy in order to have this very powerful identity that you're inviting people to embrace.
Yeah, that was, again, when you write a book, the beautiful thing about a book, as large of a project as that is, it is such a great and spacious container for you to add so many fun stories. Had I just kept it as like identity marketing, my keynote, a 60-minute prepackaged talk, I can only fit so many stories in, and usually you want like the sexiest ones. But like with a book, you can explore small business examples. You can explore sexy industries and non-sexy industries. Like we can talk about banks and we can talk about hotels and we can talk about just The not Barbies, the not Harleys, the not Taylor Swift Swifties. There are those obvious examples of identity. And then there's the non-obvious examples. I think what's interesting about identity, yes, maybe you won't be a brand that somebody will literally be buried in and have their family personally commission a Harley Davidson casket on your behalf. Got it. But how many times have we seen people literally tattoo logos on their skin, which is another huge, you've made it an identity when somebody's tattooing your logo on their skin, or wearing shirt, wearing swag. It doesn't have to necessarily be into the grave, but we as human beings, we desire deeply to demonstrate who we are through an external expression, because really what we're trying to do is also connect with other people who also carry and hold that same identity. We seek connection, we seek survivally, like just to like literally be in community with each other, because that's like we are programmed to do these things. And how do you do that without externally expressing some concept of self so that you can attract yourself? So these are all, again, fundamental psychological fundamentals that we as human beings behave in this manner. So it goes beyond just your hat. It goes beyond just the bracelet or the t-shirt or the cool sweater. What does it mean to wear this? And I think that was a really fun story that we got to share in the book. There's a company called Red Ants Pants. It's one of my favorite stories. Talk about like punching above your weight, like clothing, like workwear clothing. Like we had the Patagonias in our heads, the Columbias, the North Face. There's some epic brands that are associated with the outdoors and have like cult-like followings. Here's this company called Red Ants Pants, started by a woman named Sarah Calhoun, who she didn't even identify as a business owner, let alone doesn't identify as a marketer, barely identifies as business owner. But 20 years ago, when she was out there in the fields, the pastures, like doing manual labor, they didn't make workwear pants for women. These were pants that were specifically made for a male demographic. And when she asked these companies, can you please make workwear pants for women? Because we have hips, like we don't really want our crack to show. Can we get some pants that like go all the way up? They said, no, there's not a marketplace for that. There's not a need for that. And so she moves to Bozeman, Montana. Her first weekend in Bozeman, Montana, she's reading like that neon yellow book, Business for Dummies. And she's reading this book because it's like the origin story of every entrepreneur. There's a problem nobody else is willing to tackle. I therefore must do it. And this nice, kind gentleman walks up to her, notices the book. This is a small town, strikes up a conversation and goes, hey, why are you reading this book? Tell me your story. She proceeds to tell him an idea for this business. Lo and behold, this man had now completed 20 years working in Patagonia. Divine intervention tells her, not only do you have a great idea, you have a phenomenal idea, and you better move on this very quickly. And I want to help you and mentor you and advise you and open up my resources, my connections, my Rolodex, and help you do this. But very early on in her story, she decides to be controversial. She doesn't do a B2B like retail strategy. She goes B2C. But like, where do you target manual labor working women? They're in the middle of bloody nowhere. So her and her sister, an Airstreamer and her border collie puppy literally do the Tour de Pants. And they're taking these pants literally town to town all through North America, not downtown, no, small town to town, and sharing the word, the message that there's clothing specifically meant for women who pride themselves in their ability to do hard work. What's really cool about this story is that you think it's just a story of pants being disruptive and gaining grassroots traction, but it's so much more than that. There was a story that she told me on my podcast right at the end of the Rainmaker podcast episode where she was like, a woman was going into surgery, and because she was scared, she requested if she could wear her Red Ants pants into the surgery to remind her of her strength and who she is. Like, clearly, this is more than just pants. And in fact, they don't even ask you to buy the pants. It's an invitation to join the colony, because in a red ant colony, it's actually the female red ant that does all the manual work. It's so good. It's so good. And so, like, now, because of this invitation to identify as a red ant, to join the colony, to be a part of the ant hill, to read the stories of the blog called The Antidote, they now have like music festivals every year by their nonprofit arm that's 30,000 people. It's unbelievable what this brand has done because of the leverage of identity.
And the invitation to, I think that makes to people is that you don't have to follow what's working now, right? I
Right.
think if she had limited herself to say,
Correct.
this is how you launch an apparel brand, right? Here is the
Mm-hmm.
formula, here is the
Mm-hmm.
recipe. And okay, I think you and I have both been in and around marketing for long enough to know
Yes.
that sometimes the fundamentals are poo-pooed and not valued enough.
Yes.
That there are certain fundamentals of deeply understanding your audience.
Yeah.
And yes, understanding who they are, not just on a demographic or surface level, but at
Yeah.
a deep insight level.
Yeah.
But then there's also a time and space to say, okay, I've understood the fundamentals.
Mm-hmm.
I've done the disciplined
Mm-hmm.
actions,
Mm-hmm.
but now it's time to break the rules. It's time to think about, okay, where am I going to stand and what
Yes.
grounds am I going
Yeah.
to claim as my own
Yeah.
that maybe does fly in the face of the generally accepted way
Sure.
to do things.
Yeah. I am a believer in fundamentals, whether it's like literally for sports and nutrition. There are fundamentals that I think are core for high performance of any kind, whether it be marketing high performance, physical high performance, like fundamentals are fundamentals. But I think sometimes fundamentals blunt creativity or creative growth edge. And I think that's what you're seeing with people who understand the difference. For example, when we brought up brand identity earlier, what I'm not saying is forego strong brand identity. Do not, no, do not do that. I think brand identities, the fact that families are personally commissioning private graphic artists to make Harley Davidson caskets. Harley Davidson is not in the business of death. They're a motorcycle company. It would be a little bit of a conflict of interest. These families are having somebody personally design these coffins because you're not buying it and checking out online, right? There is something to be said about phenomenal, consistent, deep rooted brand identity that goes a really long way. I'm just making the persuasive argument that you can't forfeit identity marketing of your consumer in place of great branding. Like Jaguar this last year was a great example to me. Like they did a complete gut of their brand. And you could say that this new creative direction was really well thought out. It had tons of money behind it. It was visually like, what a story. But they like torpedoed their consumer's identity. The person who had been buying Jaguar, that had been buying Jaguar for over 100 years, like it's wild. In contrast, within the same month that Jaguar implodes their brand, Volvo triples down on their brand and specifically the identity of the person buying it. And I can say that confidently because I am a Volvo buyer and I drive my XC90 hybrid and I'm very proud to say so. Like when I became a mother, and I'm not saying this to be rude, but I'm like, I didn't want to be a minivan mom. Not because I guess it's not because it's like a terrible thing, but like in my head, I'm like, I didn't want to be like, I want to be the sexy, cool mom. I didn't want to be the minivan mom. And I also had a car that I wanted to like be proud of that I could take my kids to school in, but I could also go to a professional meeting in downtown Miami if I needed to or wherever. And so, like, when I was searching for that right type of vehicle, the Volvo was everything because I wanted to be a great mom. So, I'm going to prioritize safety of my children, Volvo check. But I also wanted the aesthetic of being that woman too, that like professional by day, stellar mom by night. Obviously, you and I know being a mother is 24/7, but just that balance. And so in the same month that Jaguar does this crazy rebrand and like forgets who they are and who they're really serving and the identity of the consumer, Volvo releases this incredible commercial where this woman barely finds out she's pregnant. She's about to be a mother and her life gets saved. Her and her future unborn child's life gets saved by another sexy, cool woman driving a Volvo and the safety features of the car saving both of them. And I'm like, oh my gosh, nailed it. Like, I'm both the mom walking across the street and I'm the woman behind the wheel. They nailed it. It's exactly how I want to be. And that's exactly why I drive the car that I drive.
But that's the thing is something that they did that's just magical is stop themselves from what I hear when I get involved with private clients all the time or in workshops. Okay, let's ask first, who do we want to be? What do we want to achieve? And
Yeah.
let's be honest, right? If you're a business, you need to make revenue, you need to make sales, you need to have
Yeah.
profit goals and penetration goals and all of those kind of goals. Yes, so you need to be very clear on your business
Yes. Of
objectives.
course.
But there's a big difference between only staying there and focused on those questions and saying, oh, who do we want to be? What do we
Yeah.
want to achieve? And then shifting
Yeah.
to what I think you're really shining the light on, which is,
Yeah.
but who do they want to be? What in their mind, right? Who do they see themselves as? Okay, I'm
Mhm.
approaching 50, I'll admit
Mhm.
that. But
Yeah, but tell that to your face.
yeah, I'm like, okay, but right, I don't necessarily want
Yeah.
to give in to what the
Yeah.
old me thought a 50-year-old looked, sound,
Totally. Same.
felt like. And so really taking that pause and saying, okay, yes, those are our business
Yeah.
objectives, but let's really dig into our audience's objectives, right?
Yeah.
What do they want to feel?
Yeah. Yeah. It's fun. So you and I are recording this literally the day after the 2024 season Super Bowl, right? So it's February 10th of 2025. And the NFL had to me one of the best identity marketing commercials ever. It was a whole campaign like I am somebody. And it's funny because it was put on by the NFL, but it wasn't featuring the NFL. It wasn't really even featuring football. It was different scenes of mentors speaking into these children's like life, saying like, okay, say it back. I am somebody. And it's whether you're different, you're small, you're young, you're this, you're that, you are somebody. And because you are somebody, you deserve respect. You deserve to be protected and you deserve to not deal with rejection. And it was this entire campaign of our children realize they are somebody. They just need somebody to show them how. And I was like, if this is an identity 101, I don't even know what it is. It was so good. And I think the NFL is doing such a phenomenal job at understanding that beyond the game on the field, it's so much more than that. Because if I can get families to have this a positive association with the NFL from when our children are young, right? And they've done some really good PR because they had a crisis at some point when it was all the concussions and the safety and all of these things. Like it wasn't, they went through a bad spot with, anyways, and other like social injustices. Like that, it wasn't, the NFL was struggling a little bit with their public perception. But to watch them understand that beyond the game, it goes back to a little girl and little boy's potential to be somebody or to be their best or to have a self-actualization. And then to have the NFL be a part of the tribe beyond their parents that also brings that about. I'm like, damn, you guys are just nailing. I cried. I've cried every time I've watched that freaking thing because I have two little boys. You can be somebody. Like it's beautiful. And I just love it. I think they're doing a phenomenal job. We're seeing identity. Nike does it. The NFL's really pulling from that playbook. It's just been really fun to see people understand that at the end of the day, beyond what you sell, it's really about the person and their self-actualization that matters most.
And I'd love to dig in with that example too, because I saw that commercial and I did think of you actually.
Of course.
And it was so interesting though, because I think for me, I took notes on that one for a couple different reasons, right? Because one of the things I teach in my workshops is all about effective brand storytelling,
Yes.
insight-driven messaging, marketing. And one of the things that is a sticky topic when it comes to that is how do you tell the story of what you support as a brand or as a
Right.
business
Where you
without coming
stand.
off as greenwashing or I'm
Oh,
only
virtue signaling. That's the other
right,
thing.
virtue signaling
Yeah.
100%. And I think that I took a note on that spot specifically because it did it so
So
well
well.
because it was, but I think it comes back to what you're talking about. It's united with the identity that they are trying to
Yeah.
invite people into that look, you may sound different. And it's so funny too, because I've got boys that are 10 and 12 that know way too many marketing terms for their age.
Yeah.
And so we
That's
were
awesome.
watching the game after that, and it was so interesting because that spot had just come on.
Mhm.
And then it was just a bit later in the game where I think the kicker, who's so much shorter.
Oh, they call him Chicken Little. Jake Elliott on the Philadelphia Eagles. Yeah, Chicken
Yeah.
Little.
But it
Yeah.
was my 12-year-old who said, wow,
Mhm.
mom, that I don't know if they did that on purpose.
Mhm.
Tell that they listen to my workshops. I don't know if they
Mhm.
did that on purpose, but that spot they were just talking about people
Mhm.
being of all sorts of
Yep, small.
shapes and sizes, that is exactly what you can see in their team. And I
Yeah.
was like, yes, okay,
Yeah.
that's exactly, but it's not, I think that when people do it virtue signaling and it comes off wrong, you don't have those moments of connection, right? You don't have that moment back to, we're not just saying this, we're living this.
Totally. Pepsi just did that. Remember the whole Pepsi generation and Kendall Jenner giving Pepsi to the cops. So yeah, that's what's so interesting. Whether you're listening to this podcast and you are a small business owner, you're like, listen, you guys, this is really fun, but I'm not the NFL. I'm not Harley Davidson. I'm not these big companies. I don't have their budget. I don't have the 100-year history. Like we see you. You're not forgotten. But even the big brands, have gotten it so wrong. So it's interesting to me. It's big budget does not mean guaranteed success. Sometimes it's just a harder fall.
Yeah.
I would argue that I think honestly, the small business owner is probably one of the best suited individuals and size of teams to leverage the psychology of identity because you have the availability of being highly proximity and intimacy with your buyers. Big brands who are large scale, they have a really hard time remaining intimate and seemingly available and high proximity to their buyer base. Small business owners don't have that same struggles. You guys are actually frontline with your people and still have that. And we're talking about identity. What better way to talk to somebody's identity when you can stare them in the face? And I think, again, small business owners are some of the best positioned people to do that.
Yeah. It's funny too, because like you, I work with entrepreneurs, small business,
Yeah.
as well as the big guys. And it always seems like they think the grass is greener, right?
Yes.
So my entrepreneurs are like, oh, I wish I could do more automation. I wish I
It's
could do more at
true. It's
scale.
so
And then
true.
I talked to Home Depot and Toyota, like I
Yes.
was talking last week, and they were
Yeah.
like, how do we get more personal? How do we get
Yep.
more inside their head?
That's really funny.
This is what we want to
I
do.
listen, I had that same experience. You and I, again, we do these workshop facilitations. So I had the chance to go to Miami to do it with Burger King. And by the way, Burger King with my two boys are like, they know the jingle, like BK, have it your way, you rule. They were so excited that mom was going to go and work with Burger King. And that came up over when I was in the room without any revealing anything that I'm not supposed to. That was the desire is like, how does an established brand of our nature remain in high proximity, remain not tone deaf, but toned in? How do we remain center of culture, even with this legacy, even with this history? How do we not date ourselves? How do we not, our buyers are aging with us? How do we make sure that we still reach a new younger buyer? These are the things that they're wrestling with. And so again, I agree I'm so glad that you pointed that out. It's like the grass isn't greener, it's just different problems. It's just different problems. But great marketing is transcendent. Like it really is great ethical marketing, inviting people to become something. It doesn't really matter what size you are. Anybody can do that if you desire to, if you even want to.
Yeah. Okay. So just to break this down a little bit, because I know we probably
Okay.
got, if I was going to bucket people into kind of two broad groups of
Okay.
listeners and watchers today, there are people who are like, yeah, okay, I have either a forming or at least, or even maybe an established identity
Sure.
that my audience has adopted or has embraced or is open to embracing. And I'm sure there are people who have just nothing. We're starting from ground zero here,
Mm-hmm.
or at least they don't think that they have one.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So let's start with them. So if there's someone listening here today who's okay, I'm in, I want to do this.
Yeah.
What's the first step? Like, how would you invite them to even just get started?
Yeah. In the book, it's first of all, it's a how-to book. So like for $25, you can learn how to leverage the psychology of identity in your business. And it is formulaic. We have a 4-step process called the identity code on how to do it. And the very first step is something that I would advise literally everybody to do because it's actually radically easy. So like the very first step of our framework is find it. You have to find your marketable identity. And the way to do so is to basically become a secret shopper, which, by the way, is $1 billion industry. But most of the time, when we talk about secret shopping, we're talking about it from the lens of what do people think about me? Do they like me? Do they not like me? Was the store clean? Was the store not clean? It's very me centric. When I say secret shopping, I'm saying I need you to secret shop from an identity perspective, an identity lens, like identity binoculars. You're not looking to see what they think about you. You're looking desperately to see what they think about themselves. So when you're going through your social media comments or you're going through the last YouTube live stuff or you're going through sales calls, listen, if you're doing sales calls, those transcripts are gold. Like whether you're going through Zoom transcripts or you're going through social media or you're going through Facebook groups or surveys or event forums, like whatever, you're going to audit the hell out of yourself and your web and online presence and all of the information that you have. But again, what you're looking for is vocabulary, language, terms, word truffles, sentences around somebody's self-concept, both positive or negative. You're not just looking for aspiration. You're looking for, are they calling themselves a bad parent? Are they calling themselves a bad driver, a poor sport, a what, small? Like you're looking for their reflective statements, how they see themselves or how they wish to see themselves. That's what I mean by identity secret shopping, because in that pursuit, you will find the beginnings of a marketable identity that you can then leverage, like a Red Ants pants, like a Nike, like an NFL, like Taylor Swift, right? But it starts with first training your eyes to see what you have not yet seen before.
Amazing. So hopefully all of you guys have your sticky notes out and wrote down, find it, circle, star, right? Highlight,
Yes.
whatever you got to do.
Yes.
But I just want to put a pin in something you talked about, which is, first of all, I love the fact you used word truffles. Our restaurant specializes in truffles and wild
Of
mushrooms.
course you do. Yeah. That's
Um,
and it's like the truffle is just so yummy.
I know, it's like this beautiful little thing. I love it. That's why I like mushroom hunting. It's like hiking with gifts,
Yeah.
with rewards. But you mentioned something too about desperately trying to figure out like what are their self-reflective terms, right? How are they describing themselves? Yes. Okay. Great to know how they view you now, right? Because that's all just good
Yeah.
information. But
Mm-hmm.
theirs, and then also I think you also talked about this too, like what is it now, but what do they desire, right? So you're almost looking for this tension, if I'm hearing you correctly.
Yes.
Tension
Yes.
between I see myself now as, but if I
If
had my
only.
wish,
Mm-hmm.
I really wish I could feel more
Mm-hmm.
this.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
that's where you come in.
Yeah, and I'll give you an example too, because like sometimes I think people like, oh yeah, that makes sense. The customer arc or the customer transformation, the before versus the after. Yeah, 100%. But it's deeper than that. So I'll give you a personal example for myself. Like my sister, 30, she's 30, anyway, she's 33 now. She was 32 when she got diagnosed with an aggressive form of breast cancer. It had already spread from tissue to lymph nodes, which is not a good thing, as anybody understands in the cancer world, right? So watching her identity wrestle and now having to identify as a cancer fighter. Now she's a cancer survivor, but just going through her own identity evolution. Apart from her going and wrestling with it, I was so surprised at the ramifications or the net effect that I was having as a witness to her and what it was doing for my own identity. So like I, as a human being, have always prioritized, and I would say I've always identified as somebody who is healthy or fit, right? Like I would say that. But because of my sister's brutal cancer fight, it had terrified me as a mother of two children. It terrifies me to think that I could ever subject my family to what she went through. Even though my identity as a fit, healthy person has not changed pre my sister's diagnosis and post, actually has not changed at all. What has radically changed is the source of that identity. I would say pre cancer diagnosis, I was fit because I was vain. Like I wanted to look a particular way, or I wanted to be in a particular size of clothing, or I wanted to like whatever. Like it was vanity driven. Now, post my sister's battle with this life threatening type of cancer, I'm still very much a healthy, fit human being. But now I've gone crazy because I don't care about vanity. What I'm a psycho about is longevity. I want to live to 100. I'm now the person that has an app on my phone that will scan barcode on food labels to see if they're carcinogenic. I have a sauna in my house, not because I enjoy sweating in a box, because it's one of the best ways to purify your body of toxins. I have a grounding mount on my bed because I've become psycho. So again, I'm a healthy person. I'm a fit person. It's not so much the vanity that's driving or the pant size or the number on a scale. Actually, I threw away my scale. I don't even have a scale in the house anymore. It's because I'm being driven by longevity. So when I say that you're looking, I get what you're saying, which is what's the tension point, but I also like what's the why behind the identity, because that's changing for people. The mother, the woman, the leader that I was pre-pandemic, post-pandemic, pre-2024, oh my gosh, post-2024, like whether you have a personal crisis like I did, or we as a global collective buyer base was forced through identity changes because we've been through some stuff in the last 4 years. Your why behind how you identify is also changing. And I think that's what you're looking for. You're looking for the why, the definition behind how people identify and their desire to be something, I think is also part of that secret shopper.
That's so good. That's so good. Hopefully you guys all captured that and hit rewind right now because that was some gold nugget stuff.
See, I get spicy. I get
No, but
calm
that's
down.
literally, if you are in marketing and you do not get fired up by this
That's
stuff,
true. That's
I'm
right.
sorry. There might be another career out there for you, but that's
Get
just
it, Mary? Look at you getting spicy.
that's just if you don't get excited by why
It's
people
true.
do
It's
what
true.
they do, why do they feel the way they feel, maybe not so
It's
much
true.
the marketing world for you. But I love what you said. It's one of those things where, yeah, this whether change is thrust upon you
Correct.
or it's just a more gradual evolution.
Correct.
It's just also a reminder, I think, of anyone listening to this, whether you are a solopreneur, a founder of a startup, or leading a global brand, you also need to do this frequently, right? You need to secret. It's not, oh, we did that a few years ago. When did you do that? And then how often is that changing for your specific type of audience base? Because this is something that certain brands probably are tapping into an identity, correct me if I'm wrong,
100.
that is more evergreen, more
Yeah.
long lasting, more
Yeah.
right. But there's certain things that you're going to tap into that could be very ephemeral. It could change radically. The one thing that I actually use as an example in some of my workshops is the They Survived commercial from Subaru. Now I know we're using a lot of car examples. When you think about it, at the very base of it, a car is a tough thing to market because people aren't in the market for it all the time.
No.
And it's a lot of functions and features that you could easily compare on a very practical, cold level. But I use that example because it is tapping into this desire,
Yep.
especially in parents,
Yep.
that I see as more evergreen, which is that fear of there is precious cargo in the back that I need
Yep.
to protect in order to feel like a good parent. And it's interesting because some things these identities may shift over time, and then some identities may be a little longer lasting.
Yeah, it's so for I think Volvo and the Subaru are both really great examples where they're not inconsistent. They've been extremely consistent where safety is the screaming message. You put your most precious loved ones in our care and we will keep you safe. But look how they've evolved to make sure that their messaging, even though safety is still the overall anthem, look how they massage their messaging to still connect with the identity of their buyers today. Oh gosh, you'll love this. It hasn't come out yet, Mary, but like I interviewed the VP of Global Creative for Pinterest on my podcast, Xanthi Wells. She's such a baddie. Oh my gosh, I have a girl crush. It's so bad. Keep it cool. Anyways, she's fantastic. And she blew my mind because you and I, our generation, we used Pinterest for projects. Like I have a board for the nursery or the wedding or like home renovation projects or what, like we use it for almost like project basis type of boarding, pinning. She has this she discovered while being VP of Global Creative that Gen Z doesn't use it like that. It was fascinating. The product team was like, Xanthi, you got to come see this. We haven't seen behaviors like this before. They would have boards like of brown, just shades of brown, just shades of brown. Why? They were using Pinterest not for project baits, anything. They were using boards to figure out who the hell they were, their identity, what they liked, what they didn't like. Like I gave this presentation to a group and one of a Gen Z raised her hand. I have an entire board on turtle shell. I'm like, of course you do. Like, of course you do. But it's fascinating that that's a really great example. I don't even know if they would identify as a social media platform, but they are a platform that is literally helping the next generation figure out who the hell they are. How cool is that? And because of that realization, they've changed their filters. They're evolving now the product to meet the desires of the people who are in a self-actualization, self-realization exploration on their platform. And they're making a ton of money doing it. So you can have both.
Yeah. But I think if they weren't open to that evolution,
Correct.
they wouldn't have seen it.
Correct.
It's such the power of being and staying in tune, not just being in tune, but staying
So
in tune with
good.
what's really going
And
on.
that's why it's so important that cross-department relationships are emphasized over and over again, because had marketing not sat down with had product not informed marketing. And so sometimes I think we in the marketing lane will it's really interesting. You can either spend too much time outside, right? And you're like a social anthropologist, like you're like immersed in the people. Yeti's very good at that. Or You spend too much time internally and you lose connection with the people that you're selling. So it is a balance where you have to be able to sit with product. You have to sit with the user. That's why marketing doesn't get enough credit, is what I'm saying. Like we work really hard. We're the bridge of all things, inside and outside.
Yeah, but my favorite marketing leaders, like from my time at WebMD or Johnson and Johnson,
Mhm.
especially Johnson and Johnson, were always those leaders who didn't limit themselves to just listening to marketing,
I love
right?
that.
They would be having lunch with sales. They would be having breakfast with people over in the manufacturing department, right? They would have time with the customer service team and
So important.
what are you
Mhm.
hearing from people coming in? And
Mhm.
be able to take that in because yeah, you need to understand this. I feel like that's going to be a part two. We're going to have to talk about a whole
That's
like
a great part too.
important to listen to other people within your
Yeah.
organization, not just
Yeah.
outside. So amazing. Speaking of that, in bringing our amazing conversation, just want to say thank you again, Veronica, for sharing your expertise with us and the listeners today.
Just so everybody understands, I adore Mary. So anything that you could ever want or do, I could literally jam with you. We've done this. We literally, her and I have been in a weekend in a beach house with no makeup, just being us. And you are just a gift that keeps on giving for me. So I adore you. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing with us. Yes, I could totally make up totally optional, but we could
Yeah.
do this for hours. So if you were going to share just maybe two things, but
Mhm.
don't hate me for asking.
No
One,
pressure.
we'll stay on the expert level.
Okay.
One thing to invite our audience to, if they sticky note style could write one thing down to take action on this week based on
Mm.
about with identity marketing. So they're not feeling inspired, but then not taking action. That's what we're trying to,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. So yes, apart from buying the book on identitymarketingbook.com, if that's so your desire, because that would be really sweet and awesome. I would say just personally, the one skill that I am investing in myself deeply actually two skills. One is mastering my voice. I'm actually taking freaking singing lessons. What? I'm not a singer. But there is something really powerful about having confidence to command and manipulate your voice high, low, stronger, lower. I don't know what it is. It's giving me a level of confidence that I didn't realize I had. And that you don't have to be a keynote speaker to want that. You are as a marketer, you are literally an influential force in the world. You have the ability to change culture inside and out, whether it's a culture within the organization or outside of it. But you can't do that if you're quiet or don't know the strength of your own voice. And so that's one thing that in a personal development, I'm like, I need to own my voice. And not because I'm planning on singing opera. And then the second skill that I would say is radically important. And if you want to pick up another book, if you're just one of those book lovers, Story Worthy by Matthew Dix is probably one of the best how to book on storytelling that I've ever read. He literally gives you all the secrets. He breaks down the structure of a story. He's won story competitions. He's like a 26, 36, I don't even know at this point, decade, like dozens and dozens of Moth Slam winner competitions. It's insane what he's done. And he takes any story, the most mundane, like I was picking my kids in the car line, and he can turn it into the greatest story of your life. And so I think you're brilliant at this too. Like you understand the vehicle of a story and how powerful it is to convey messaging, culture, change. And so I think storytelling, I know it's a buzzword, but it's still, I think people don't realize really what storytelling is and how to leverage it properly.
Amazing. All right. We're definitely going to have people buy the book because I want you guys to have this. And the thing I love about how you wrote this
Mhm.
is exactly what you said earlier, is it gives people an actionable
Yeah,
plan.
how
This is
to.
not
Mhm.
theory, right? You could have written a theory book so much. You've forgotten more than other people will ever know in their entire life.
Mhm.
Um, but you didn't do that. You brought it to
Mm-mm.
people can actually understand the why behind it. Yes, I
Yeah,
can understand the theory, but now I actually have a framework to implement.
right.
So
Mm.
I love the fact that's how you crafted the book in that way.
Thank-
So my last question is
Yeah.
more your identity. So share something fun about the audience that in addition to your marketing brilliance and your
Hmm.
obviously newfound skills in singing, is there
I love
something
it.
that makes up your identity that makes you that our audience should?
I've alluded to it a little bit earlier, but if you looked at me, you wouldn't be like, she's 100% Cuban. My mom's side is from Spain, so she's like milky and just complex. And so I don't ever, no one ever looks at me and goes, you must be Latina. But I am so proud. I am so ridiculously proud of who I came from, my parents, the struggles. And I think obviously being the oldest daughter, I feel this responsibility to carry their story forward, to in some ways make their sacrifice all worth it. I know that's part of me and my therapist can talk that out, but just I'm so proud of my Cuban heritage. I tell my children who are now half Cubans that I'm like, you don't like every time they listen to it like a Spanish song and they like it, I'm like, there's your blood. It's coming out. I just get so excited. And I think that's the other thing too. I think as women, as professionals, how many times have we either been told literally or have felt that we needed to shrink in stature or presence to not be perceived as anything wrong. But because I think of my identity being Latin, it gives me a little bit more permission to be like, just be me. Have you seen where I come from? So I don't know. I can just, I remember early in my 20s, like anytime that I would get that verbal criticism, I would combat it with some humor. I'm like, it's just my Latin blood. I can't help myself. But now, as I've aged and as I've gotten older, it's no longer a defense mechanism. It is very much an empowering an identity where I own proudly, period. And so that's been interesting. And I appreciate the question.
And I appreciate you sharing the evolution because I'm sure
Yeah.
there are people listening who can relate to the fact that I may have said this in the past defensively, but actually
Mhm.
now I own it,
You
man.
own it. Yeah.
Amazing. You are always the most amazing, fun guest to have on the show. Thank you,
Thanks,
Veronica,
friend.
for sharing your wisdom. I know we're going to be including the links of where to find you and how to get their hands on your book. But if someone was going to right away go and look you up, try to get into
Yeah.
contact, what's the best way to connect with you online?
I am V Romney on all things social media. And I do actually love being DM'd and messaged when, if there was something in this podcast that you're like, oh, I really loved when Mary and Veronica said this, let us know. Words of affirmation are a love language. So affirm, let us know. We're putting ourselves out there for your benefit as much as possible. And so to find out that it did benefit you means a lot to us.
100%. Absolutely. Thanks, Veronica. I will be talking to you again soon. Thanks for being our special guest today.
Bye, friends.
And for all of you guys listening and watching, thank you for joining us for this episode of Sticky Note Marketing. If there is a topic or an expert that you want us to feature on the show, please reach out to me and my team over at support@maryczarnecki.com. And who knows, maybe your topic will be the next one we pick. So see you guys on the next episode.